Good afternoon. It's Sunday, and it's beautiful. It's rainy and cold. It's denim weather, clearly. I wanted to talk about meaning in life, because I keep on talking about all these different topics, and at root, I think what lies at their root is the idea that we are given true meaning by God, and there's no standard by which to interpret life and its meaning aside from His Word. So I was thinking about the differences between imperial fact and subjective reality, and how subjective reality in a lot of ways has meaning inherently attached to it, like true meaning, not subject. I'm obfuscating my point. What I'm saying is, I've been thinking about the fact that there is true meaning to be found in life experiences, and even in small things like joy or happiness. Like, those things speak to a deep-seated meaning in life that we all have, and it's not arbitrary. But first, I wanted to play some music, because that's what we're here to do. There's an album called Zonky. Master Chief, this is for you. There's an album called Zonky, and it's by a group called Humphreys McGee. I played an Humphreys McGee tune on the guitar at some point on this thing. But they have an album called Zonky, and it's a mashup album. For those of you who don't know what mashups are, it's just taking a couple songs or a few songs and mashing them together. Typically, though, it's done electronically, so you take a couple songs and digitally alter them a little bit. Maybe change the key, or if they're in the same key, just change the tempo of each one and combine them. But this group, they're such phenomenal musicians, and they can play such a wide range of genres as well. And so they do these mashups themselves, like actually playing and singing the songs, which I think is phenomenal. And there's some other bands that do that. There's like Pamplemousse is one, which is a pretty good band. You can look them up on YouTube. They do a lot of good mashups. And actually, Pamplemousse, I think, started another band called Scary Pockets. They don't do so much mashups as they don't really do mashups so much as they take popular songs and make them into funk songs, which is great as well. This is called National Loser Anthem, and it's like they mash up Beck with Phil Collins. And it's so good.
son was a monkey. Butane in my veins and I'm out to cut the junkie with the plastic eyeballs. Spray paint the vegetables, dog food stalls with the beefcake pantyhose. Kill the headlights and put it in neutral. Stop car flaming with the loser in the cruise control. Babies in Reno with the vitamin D. Got a couple of couches, I sleep on the love seat. Someone keeps saying I'm the same to complain about a shotgun blade and a stain on my shirt. Don't believe everything that you breathe. You got a parking violation and a maggot on your sleeve. So shake a face with some bass in the dark. Saving all your food stamps and birds out of trail park. Yo, cut it.
All right, so that's Beck, and that's the beginning of the song. And then it, transitions to Phil Collins. I'll try and fast forward to it. Yeah. That's the mashup part, obviously.
One's on the porch of the other in her back with the gun shorts and the cocaine nose job. The dictator rap with the folk singer slop. He hung himself with a guitar string. I slapped a cookie neck and it's hanging from a kitchen ring. You can't rap if you can't relate. Trade the cash for the beef, for the body, for the hate. And my time is like a piece of wax falling on the termites. It's choking on the splinters.
That's the idea. It's a really good album. They do a couple songs that I'm not really fond of. They do some like AC/DC, which I've never really been a big fan of. This is Sweet Dreams. I forget. Yeah. Mixed with I Wear My Sunglasses at Night.
Everybody looking for something. Some of them want to use you. And mind to disagree. Travel the world and the seven seas. Everybody looking for something. Ooh.
just so good. Anyway, that's the idea. Zonky, Humphreys McGee. Great stuff. Okay, so meaning. I was reading Maps of Meaning by Jordan Peterson a while ago. I didn't get very far. I got like to chapter 2, I think. But I didn't get very far because it's super heady and it's fairly deep. So, especially for me, I'm a moron. So you have to like read some and digest it and then read a little bit more. And I was renting it from the library, so yeah. Anyway, I think part of his basic premise is that the world exists. The world exists as like a two-part paradigm. It's a place of things on the one hand and a form for actions on the other. I think that's how he puts it. And the place of things is where the science and empirical data and those sorts of things come into play. You observe things and you draw conclusions based on those observations. A form for action is the other side of that. By the way, these are really yummy. This is little cohiba mini cigars. Yeah, that's beside the point. This is a place for things thing. And I'm going to smoke one, which is part of the form for action. Anyway, that's a little object lesson. So the form for action is where morality and civil ethic, those sorts of things come into play. The way that we deal with one another, the things that we do, and the things that we say. And he says basically that neither of those sides gives us a comprehensive understanding of the world. They both require one another. For instance, so he says everything is something and everything means something. And he gives a couple examples that I don't remember. Something about a kid with I can't remember, so I'm not going to try to explain it. But like, what's a good example? Well, so like a car, like it is a physical object which has a motor and belts and machinery and a computer and all of those things, but it means transportation. It means, the ability to make money, to get to my job, or like if it's my parents' car, and I'm a teenager, or let's say one of my, when my daughters grow up and are old enough to drive and they're learning to drive in my car, and they take the car out once, by themselves, the car itself has more meaning than just, it has meaning beyond its reality as a physical object. I don't want my daughter to be reckless in the car because her life would be in danger in doing so. Maybe that's not, that's a decent example, but, or like, let's say I have a lot of sentimental value. Maybe it's an old truck or something. The truck itself has value for me, and if my daughter, takes a turn a little too sharply and hits a curb, and I get upset with her because she dinged she hurt the vehicle. I'm not upset because the purely physical aspect of the car is altered a little bit. I'm upset because the car has sentimental value to me, and I don't want it to be damaged. I don't want that value diminished. And so she comes to understand that car not simply as a physical object with a motor and wheels, but as an object which must be treated reverently because my emotional faculties are somehow connected to that physical object. So it's like that sentimental meaning and value would not exist if the physical qualities of that car didn't exist, obviously. So you can't have intangible meaning without a tangible thing, without a tangible object in that scenario. So you can't have one without the other. But the true meaning of that vehicle does not lie in its physical representation, in its physical manifestation in this world. That's a really interesting idea. And the fact is that no one is actually objective. Like even, materialists aren't objective completely, because we're always ascribing value to physical things, even in our most clear-headed. Well, that's a false light. So even the most objective materialist ascribes value to objects beyond those objects' physical realities and physical traits. And that's an important thing to understand about the world and about people. Especially if you're talking to a materialist in any real way, or trying to share the gospel with someone. It's a great way to illustrate the idea that there's more to the world than cold, hard reason, quote unquote, reason might suggest. And that's not even involving the fact of the intangible moral code that I think we all have as a result of being image bearers of God. So this is a book that everyone should read. This is Orthodoxy by Chesterton, G.K. Chesterton. And I'm still not through it. I come back to it I'm about halfway. I come back to it every 6 months or so and basically read another chapter. But it's one of the most, he's a genius. He was a genius. He's dead. But his writing is phenomenal in this area particularly. And I just wanted to read a couple things because I think it'll serve to elucidate what I'm trying to say. The idea that the reality of the world is the real meaning of what we see in the world is found in, well, okay. If I'm stumbling over my concept that much, I should just have someone else explain it, because especially if it's Chesterton, he'll do it better. So he talks about the fact that modern minor poets and naturalists that talk about the bush or the brook, but singers of the old epics and fables were supernaturalists and talked about the gods of brook and bush. Which is why, why am I reading without my glasses? Which is why the modern poets say that the ancients didn't appreciate nature, because they, in their opinion, they didn't describe it the way it is in its reality. They described it with an inherent aspect of the supernatural with it. But Chesterton is saying that of course they did, because the meaning and the significance we draw from a babbling brook or a bush whispering in the wind is a transcendent kind of value. It's not empirical. So this is kind of in the middle of a thought, but I'm going to read a couple excerpts. He says, "We can say why we take liberty from a man who takes liberty, but we cannot say why an egg can turn into a chicken any more than we can say why a bear could turn into a fairy prince. As ideas, the egg and the chicken are further off from each other than the bear and the prince, for no egg in itself suggests a chicken, whereas some princes do suggest bears. All terms used in..." So this is, by the way, the chapter called The Ethics of Elfland. And he's talking about we who understand that the magic of the world. And obviously, eventually he gets into the fact that there's only quote unquote magical meaning in the world because it was created to give us those joys and meaning, and the value ascribed to the natural world was ascribed by the Creator. Anyway, all the terms used in the science books, law, necessity, order, tendency, and so on, are really unintellectual because they assume an inner synthesis which we do not possess. The only words that ever satisfied me as describing nature are the terms used in the fairy books: charm, spell, enchantment. They express the arbitrariness of the fact and its mystery. A tree grows fruit because it is a magic tree. Water runs downhill because it is bewitched. The sun shines because it is bewitched. I deny altogether that this is fantastic or even mystical. We may have some mysticism later on, but this fairy tale language about things is simply rational and agnostic. It is the only way I can express in words my clear and definite perception that one thing is quite distinct from another, that there is no logical connection between flying and laying eggs. It is the man who talks about a law, quote unquote, that he has never seen who is the mystic. Nay, the ordinary scientific man is strictly a sentimentalist. He is a sentimentalist in this essential sense, that he is soaked and swept away by mere associations. He has so often seen birds fly and lay eggs that he feels as if there must be some dreamy, tender connection between the two ideas, whereas there is none. A forlorn lover might be unable to disassociate the moon from lost love. So the materialist is unable to disassociate the moon from the tide. In both cases, there is no connection except that one has seen them together. A sentimentalist might shed a tear at the spell of apple blossoms because, by a dark association of his own, it reminded him of his boyhood. So the materialist professor, though he conceals his tears, is yet a sentimentalist because, by a dark association of his own, the apple blossoms remind him of apples. But the cool rationalist from fairyland does not see why, in the abstract, the apple tree should not go crimson tulips. It sometimes does in this country. This country being Elfland. So his point is that people say people talk about laws of nature as if they understand, as if there's some actual law outside of observed patterns. But there isn't. I mean, yes, we understand that the moon pulls the tides because of gravity, but gravity is this magical thing that, even the greatest scientists, like, where does gravity come from? It's a it's a distortion of space-time, which affects material objects within that space-time. But what does that even mean? It's like this, where does gravity come from? It's without the idea. So he's saying that you can try and rationalize the physical world all you want and say that it's dictated by laws that we can see and understand, but it's simply inexplicable. And the only reasonable explanation is that there is a creator who decided it would be so. Yeah, all right, so I'll read the end of the chapter. Thus ends, in unavoidable inadequacy, the attempt to utter the unutterable things. These are my ultimate attitudes towards life, the soils for the seeds of doctrine. These in some dark way I thought before I could write and felt before I could think. That we may proceed more easily afterward, I will roughly recapitulate them now. I felt in my bones, first, that the world does not explain itself. It may be a miracle with a supernatural explanation. It may be a conjuring trick with a natural explanation. But the explanation of the conjuring trick, if it is to satisfy me, will have to be better than the natural explanations I have heard. The thing is magic, true or false. Second, I came to feel as if magic must have a meaning, and meaning must have someone to mean it. There was something personal in the world, as in a work of art. Whatever it meant violently. Third, I thought this purpose beautiful in its old design, in spite of its defects, such as dragons. Fourth, that the proper form of thanks to it is some form of humility and restraint. We should thank God for beer and burgundy by not drinking too much of them. We owed also an obedience to whatever made us. And last, and strangest, there had come into my mind a vague and vast impression that in some way all good was a remnant to be stored and held sacred out of some primordial ruin. Man had saved his good as Crusoe saved his goods. He had saved them from a wreck. All this I felt, and the age gave me no encouragement to feel it. And all this time I had not even thought of Christian theology. So he gets into later, obviously, as a building onto that idea, he gets into the world as a place created by God, and what that means for us. Lewis did something similar in Mere Christianity, which you should also read. And he talks about natural law, and natural law meant something. Well, I mean, the way that people talked about natural law then, they used it to mean the idea that there is a moral code that is natural to man, not what we mean by natural law now, typically in the academy. In the academy now, natural law means, the study of earth or whatever, or the study of, well, what does it mean? I guess physics or something. Whatever the case, it's a different concept typically meant now. But Lewis talks about the idea that there is transcendent there is an understanding of morality in the world that that transcends, again, transcends empirical reasoning, or transcends empirical reasoning. Robbie George has some good stuff to say on this too, but Lewis makes the example that if you are on a city bus, I keep on letting this thing go out. If you're on a city bus and someone has their bag in the aisleway, and you walking back to your seat trip on the bag, there's no the person who left their bag isn't at fault morally for making you trip. There's no moral culpability. That's the word I was trying to think of. But if you're walking to your seat and the same person puts their foot out to trip you, they are morally culpable for your tripping. And so he's saying, the same thing happened in both scenarios. You tripped on a bag either way. Sorry, if he shoves his bag out into the aisleway on purpose to trip you, you tripped on a bag either way. But in the first instance, there is no moral culpability for the person with the bag. In the second instance, he's done a work of evil against you. And then Robbie George talks about the fact of transcendent value in the world. Value in the world that transcends empirical data. He talks about the idea that if you have a relative who's terminally ill and he's in a hospital bed but has no awareness of the world around him, he's completely lucid, or he's in a coma or whatever, and you, for love for him, go and visit him every Tuesday, and you sacrifice time with your family, and you sacrifice some overtime at work, and you do all these things just to sit by your friend who has no idea that you're there, and in reality, it will make no difference to his existence one way or the other. But we would consider that an ultimate expression of goodness. Whereas empirically, if you look at that scenario, you could say nothing's being accomplished here except for bad things. You are losing time that you could be spending with your family, or at work making money for your family, and the time that you're spending with this person has no actual result to the good. But again, we would all say that is a good thing to do. Whereas he makes the example to the contrary, that if I got up right now and went over to the door and stood on one foot and started opening and closing the door repeatedly for 10 minutes, no one would say that's an expression of goodness. You would say that is an arbitrary action with zero net gain as a result. You'd say probably that I'm a nut, and should be put away, because and the difference is only that one is an expression of the moral code that we all have an understanding of, whether we believe in God or not, and one is not. don't know. It's a really interesting thing to think about. That's a pretty high pass over the topic, but I don't know. It's a really good thing to think about because there's so much that goes into that topic. You can read so much and learn so much just in considering the idea of, well, just meaning, but in considering the idea of meaning in life and what that actually is, you can learn and grow a whole lot. To Chesterton's point about the physical world expressing magic and beauty, I was thinking about the Higgs boson or the Higgs field, which if you've never heard of, you should look up because it's fascinating. But and like, so when he was talking about gravity, or the moon pulling the tide, and the idea that it's, sure, empirically you can understand that it's gravity that pulls the tide, the gravity of the moon pulls the tide, but that's why. But I was saying that's like, gravity is like this magic thing. If we didn't know God existed, if we didn't know our God through reading His Word, people who don't know God can't explain gravity. And I was thinking about the Higgs field, which is an incredibly difficult thing to understand. And I'm an idiot, so I know only the few things that my dad used to talk about. And in 2012, I looked into it again because they finally were able to create a Higgs boson particle at the Large Hadron Collider in CERN, which is where if you don't know what the LHC is, it's like this giant loop. I forget how long the loop is. I think it's miles long or a mile long. I forget. It's a long loop of tubing, basically, and they shoot particles through this tube and they smash them together, and they observe the resulting particles that are byproducts of this huge influx of energy when these particles smash into each other. And on July 4 in 2012, they finally were able to observe the Higgs boson particle, because the Higgs field, the Higgs boson particle had been this theoretical explanation of like why things have mass at all. And so that's one reason why they built the Large Hadron Collider, was to try and create an interaction, a particle interaction, in which they could observe the Higgs boson, and then thereby confirm the existence of the Higgs field, which is how they have come to understand why things have mass. Particles have mass because of the way that they interact with the Higgs field, which apparently the Higgs field is a field of Higgs boson particles that exist everywhere in the universe with the same consistency, whereas other particle fields exist in different parts of the universe, in different densities and in different iterations. The Higgs field exists consistently throughout the whole universe, and particles that interact more aggressively, more substantially with the Higgs field, have more mass. So photons, which are virtually massless, hardly interact with the Higgs field at all. But other particles which have more mass interact with the Higgs field way more. Anyway, all this is to say that, you know, the only reason I don't go through my chair right now is because the electrons in me and the electrons in my chair don't pass through one another, and because they have mass and they don't pass through one another. But that itself is like this magic thing. And even after 2012, even after we confirmed that the Higgs boson particle exists, which thereby confirms the existence of the Higgs field, what does that even mean? It means that there's this intangible field of particles which give other particles mass when they interact with those particles. It's like someone who sorry, my wife called me and I had to answer. I'm talking to the camera, honey. I need you to be quiet for just a little bit more. I'm almost done, okay? I have an audience. Someone who won't acknowledge the existence of a creator, and we're not even talking about the moral side of things. We're not talking about the reality of sin and the need for repentance. We're talking about just this physical reality for a second. People who won't acknowledge the existence of a creator have no answer for something like the Higgs boson particle. I mean, the top physicists in the world, there's no explanation for it, for its existence. I know that's an obscure example, but I started thinking about that when I started thinking about this, and so I figured I'd talk about it because I think it's really interesting. But I mean, we could talk about consciousness or something. Like, what is consciousness? That's another one that no one can explain. You got it? Okay. That's another one that no one can explain. But it's real. I mean, anyway, I guess that's all I'll say because I could ramble on and on and on, but I'm going to do one more music thing. I was listening to Alan Stone yesterday, while I was working. Actually, no. You know what I'm going to do? There's a song that, yeah, I'm gonna play this song. This is a song that Frank sent me the other day. He said it's a song for a foggy day, and it's not really foggy right now, but it is rainy, which is close, just bigger drops. It's a really good song though. It's a group called Electric Light Orchestra. The song is called Telephone Line. This was written in 1976.
I tell you everything
It's really solid. It's a good tune. All right, that's the show today. Thank you for watching. You need to subscribe, because if you're not, what are you even doing? Hey, Eva, come here, baby. Come here. Come here. Oh, you're so big. I want you to, you see it? You see there?
Yeah.
Can you say like, comment, and subscribe?
Like, comment, subscribe.
Say subscribe.
Great.
Good girl. What is that?
Yeah.
That's a giraffe? What's his name?
I don't know. It's just giraffe.
Just giraffe. I don't know his name either.
This is.
Say bye. Say bye.
Bye.
Oh, you're so